We are out at the shelter again today in this beautiful snowy forest, and I can't wait to get to work because I've got a new toy to play with. This is the Husqvarna Forest Axe. Now this was a gift from Husqvarna, which shows extreme confidence in their product because they are well aware that I'm a big fan of the Grand Forest Brooks axes. I own a whole stable of them. And so for them to know that and still say, you know what, we want you to try our axe, means it must be good. And so far, I am extremely impressed. This could possibly be my new favorite axe. Before I get started with it though, there's a few minor details that we need to touch up on this axe before we start using it. And so I thought I would just share that process with you. I do this to all my axes, regardless. It's just a good inspection and just a good way to make sure that this axe is gonna last long for you. So here's my process to get an axe tuned up before I use it, right out of the box. Now, when they sharpen these axes, they're coming out of a factory, they're sharpening them on a machine, and when they do their very last sharpen, they're grinding it, and a little bit of that metal starts to fold over the front of the blade. Now it'll feel extremely sharp. If you were to run your finger along the front, it's gonna cut you. It's gonna be extremely sharp, but what's really happening is right at the top of this blade here, it's curled over just a little bit. Now, sometimes it's going to be worse than others, depends who's doing the work, but there might be a small little edge here. This is pretty common in the woodworking tools as well. So all you need to do is you can either take a leather strop and just strop it if it's not too bad. If you can actually feel metal, then it doesn't hurt. Just take a little bit of a grinding stone and just really lightly take that edge off. Just want to give it a real light cleanup. You're really not applying much pressure, just to make sure that there's no metal sticking and folding over. Because what will happen if you start to use it like that is that little piece of metal that's slightly bent over, when you start hitting the axe, that metal is actually going to bend back into the metal and dull your axe. So even though it was really sharp to start, it's going to dull really quickly. So just by cleaning that off, and just making sure that that metal is perfectly pointed and sharp on both sides, your axe is going to stay sharper a lot longer. So that's pretty much it. That's all I do. That's about as much as you need to do. You're not really sharpening it. You're just lightly cleaning off any metal that might have been bent. And sometimes that could just happen. Some of the edge could bend. Maybe it just gets banged up in shipping or in the store, or something happens to it. So it's just good to make sure that you got a nice sharp edge to start. And when you run your finger up and down it with the end of your nail, you shouldn't feel any burr. It should be nice and smooth right off the edge. If you feel any clicking before you get to the end, you need to sharpen it a little more. So that already feels good. So the next thing I look for is where the wedge is put in at the top of the head. When they drive the wedge in, they need to do that in order for the top of the axe to be mushroomed out just slightly. That's what holds the head of the axe on. But I just noticed here that it's a little bit cracked on the side, and this is fine. I mean, this is not a big deal, but I like to just smooth that down a little bit just so that it doesn't hit the logs and branches and crack out more. So now you could just take a piece of sandpaper, or I'm using a file, and I'm just really lightly rounding that edge off, just so that it's less likely to chip off more. And you definitely don't want to do this too much because you need that mushroom on the top. You don't want to file that down because that's what holds the axe on. I'm just kind of cleaning up that little bit of roughness there. So that's it, just a little quick file just to round that edge. This just eliminates the chance of it chipping off later. Okay, and my third and final step is Renaissance wax. I use this on everything. All my woodworking tools, all my axes, chisels, anything that's wood or metal, I basically coat in this stuff. So this is just a wax, and I apply that on the handle to keep the wood nice and moist, to repel water, and I leave my stuff in the snow and in the rain, and this just helps keep that wood protected. And it also just keeps it nice and smooth so that it's not drying out and getting rough. I just find by constantly waxing the handle, my axe handles start to get a nice kind of yellowish, rustic looking patina, and the wood just seems to have nice grain that pops, and everything just looks a little nicer and feels nicer and lasts longer. So with the wax, you actually want to get friction going, because the hotter you get that wax, the more it's going to melt into the wood. So keeping a little friction moving and heating it up in your hands is what you're going for. You can just see how nice that grain starts to pop. Like, that's a beautiful handle. That is beautiful wood. You can notice here that they've chosen a perfectly straight grain wood for the handle. Get a lot of wax on the bottom of that. Okay. And I put a little wax on the top too. You don't want this wood to dry out. You want to keep it moist. As soon as wood starts to dry out, it gets weak and it will shrink, and that's when your axe head's going to get loose. So you want to try to get as much, even I sometimes put linseed oil in here just to make sure that wood is always nice and moist. Okay, now that my wood's done, I'm just going to put a little coat on all the metal. So wax repels moisture, and moisture is what creates rust. So just by giving it a nice coat of wax, basically I do this every time I come home. When I'm done after a day's work, my axe has come into the house with me, and I do this every single time. I put wax on the handle and I put wax on the head, and that just helps keep them nice and strong and looking good. And that's it. We are ready to use it. So this is a really nice axe. You know, when I first started in getting into bushcraft and axe work, and I always wanted someone to just tell me, what's the one axe I need to buy? If you could only buy one axe, what would it be? Because you have to start somewhere, right? And what I've realized is that if you only can have one axe and you're not really concerned about it being really light for taking on backcountry canoe trips, pick an axe that you can hold out straight in front of you without it being too heavy, but still that you feel a little bit of weight. If it's just too light and flimsy, then you're just going to be wasting a lot of energy swinging rather than having the axe do the work. But if it's too heavy for you to hold out straight to the side, straight in front of you, then it's going to be a little too heavy to be doing real agile work. And sometimes you just need to be using it like a real fine tool. So I think that's why I feel like this might be my favorite axe. It's really just a matter of the balance of it and the size of it. And I haven't had this size of axe yet, so I'm really looking forward to getting to know it. Let's get started. Let's go play. So I'm on a tree farm where removing trees is part of the process to taking care of your crop. We have to remove whole rows in order to let the other ones grow bigger. And we also remove anything that's got a defect or it just isn't straight. So it's a perfect place to be testing axes, as we got plenty of trees we need to cut down on private property. So let's take a look at this tree right here and see how long it's going to take us to get through it. I can't quite get my fingers around it, but kind of get an idea. Let's give it a few chops. We'll bring the camera in tighter. Now, I do have to be careful because it is icy here, so I can't be swinging too hard. I'm going with a beaver chew method here, which I find just to be the most efficient for these smaller trees. Okay, that one's ready to topple, so I'm going to move the camera. So as you can see, I'm really not swinging very hard. This is a really nice sharp axe with a really thin point on it, really thin head that really bites in deep to the wood. So you can swing pretty lightly. You get a pretty deep penetration on your cut. I think that guy's about to go. Just give it a little push here. I'm gonna let it fall back that way if I can. There we go. Batter's up. And it's down. When I used to fell with a full-size felling axe, I'd always be switching axes at this point. But this axe is perfect just to be even doing some light one-handed work. When you're swinging at these lower branches, you want to make sure you keep your body safe distance. When you're not swinging very hard, it's okay just to use a one-hand thing. I don't know. Not sure if that's a proper safety, but it works for me. Can you hear that sound, that zing? I love that sound. Maybe it's just me, but when I use American-made axes, they don't sound like that. And they kind of sound more like a thump. I'm not discriminating against all American-made axes, but some of the bigger mainstream manufacturers, they just dull out really easy. They don't have that nice crisp sound. Something about this, these axes coming out of Europe just seem to hold an edge better. They sound better. And I really don't know enough about metal to tell you why that is, but I can feel it. Okay, so we're going to chop down a few more trees here, show you some different examples, how it works with a smaller tree when you're cutting for speed, how it works on a bigger tree when you're cutting for accuracy, and just run a bit more footage of this axe in action, and then we'll come to our conclusion. The last tree I chopped down, which was about 4.5 inches in a minute. That was kind of just being a bit reckless and just trying to go as fast as I can. This time I'm going to go for a bit more precision. This tree is about 6.5 inches in diameter, so let's see how it goes. And I realize it's easier to chop the tree down higher, but since I'm building with these logs, and the best part of the log is the lower half, I do chop pretty low. So that's the reason why I'm chopping lower. So I'm going to start to do a bit more of a beaver chew style rather than a standard notch and relief cut, because this tree is perfectly straight and I know that its upper branches are all caught up in the canopy, so I can completely sever this tree and it's not going to fall. You're going to notice I already have a little bit of an angle that just naturally happens when you swing from one side. By doing the beaver chew, I'm going to kind of balance that out, and this will eliminate the tree from falling that direction rather than that direction, which I want. Okay, so I just saw this whole tree slip back a little bit, which means I need to keep taking it out of the front without swinging too hard that pushes it back. being a little bit silly here, just to emphasize exactly how caught up these trees are. Normally this tree would have fallen by now, but like I said, due to the straightness and the canopy, it's pretty stable. Should go down here. So there we go. There was about less than an inch of solid wood there left before this fell. Here I'm just showing you a variety of different shots with this axe in action, kind of showing you the versatility of it, what I do with it, and what I did to put it through the tests in order to give it an honest review. I peel the bark off of all the trees that I build with because it helps the wood last longer. When you leave the bark on, the moisture gets under there and the bugs, and the wood starts to deteriorate a lot quicker. So peeling bark is a good procedure for building camp furniture. So in this clip here, I am building sawhorses. So it's a good example of how I can also use this axe as a woodworking tool for accuracy projects. That's after a month of being used without sharpening it. Still able to do feather sticks. Not very good, but that's me, not the axe. All right, so to conclude this review, I want to just make it really clear, Husqvarna did not pay me to do this video. They didn't even ask me to do anything like this. They just sent me a bunch of stuff and hope that I like it, and I really do. And if I had lost all my axes and I didn't own a single axe and I need to go out and buy an axe, that would be the one I get. You just can't beat the price point. It has been absolutely fantastic. It's just the perfect weight, perfect size for me, at least. I like that weight that you can hold it out to the side and in front, and it's not too heavy. And the steel has held up really great. I have not sharpened it, I don't think, since I got it. Maybe a really light honing, but it has stayed really sharp considering the abuse that I've put it through. So yeah, I highly recommend it. I have cut down about 40 trees with it. I made these sawhorses with it, so it works really good as a tool to choke up on it. I've processed firewood for about 15, 20 campfires, chopping wood, making kindling, making feather sticks. It is a fantastic all-around axe. The only concern was that someone on Instagram said that these axe heads were breaking right at the stamp. And so I asked Husqvarna what the response was to that. And they acknowledged that it had happened, and it was in 2015. But they assured me that it has been fixed and that is not going to be an issue that you guys have anymore. And if it is, please come back and tell me in the comments. I'd be really curious to know and be able to pass that information on to them as well. So there we go, Husqvarna Forest Axe. It gets thumbs up from me. Until next week, be nice to people, be nice to our earth.